Welcome to another episode of the All Things Endurance podcast. I'm your host, Rick Prince, and I'm excited to have on the podcast today Alli Felsenthal. Alli, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Alli is the creator of Run with Alli. It's a coaching and run form business. She, like myself, are former New Yorkers. Alli is now living out in California and has been killing it with her business. And as a lot of our listeners know, especially on the coaching end, a lot of the questions that we get here at USCA are, how do I start a coaching business? But more importantly, how do I grow it? How do I thrive? Because it can be a pretty daunting experience. So we're going to kind of delve into all of those topics today here with Alli. So, Alli, before we get into sort of the meat of that, maybe you could tell us maybe a little bit more about yourself, how you got into running, how you got into coaching.
Yeah, I would love to. So thank you for having me again, Rick. It's a pleasure to be
Sure.
here. And I am a former corporate ad tech employee. So, I was working in corporate America in New York City full time for about 6 years and started running for stress relief to
Hmm.
get away from my desk, to just get away from that 9 to 5. And yeah, so I was not running for performance goals at all initially.
Okay.
And I recognized that a lot of my coworkers were struggling with the same issues I was, which was not being able to get up from our desk, not being able to move, not being able to like kind of live the way we wanted to live. And, fast forward a little bit of time, I created a 3 month exit strategy of leaving corporate America. I
Wow.
chose to kind of pivot my career path and go into the fitness realm, not necessarily coaching right away, but I wanted to
Hmm.
do something in terms of like endurance and strength training. And
Okay.
so I went to Equinox, was turned down for a personal training position, accepted to a corporate sales position. And then I begged them, like in the interview, I was like, listen, give me a shot. Like, and they're like,
Yeah.
are you crazy? You're going from a salary job to like a totally commission based job. Are you sure you want to
Right.
do this? And I was like, yeah, and I said to myself, I'm going to give myself 6 months to try to kind of establish myself in the space, to learn, to grow, to obviously like go through EFTI, it's the proprietary schooling program and Equinox, and to like establish myself and also just make those connections and see if this was like a good fit for me.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of, in a nutshell, how I went from corporate to pivoting careers. While I was doing this, I was also running for stress relief. I started coaching friends like for free, just for the fun of it. They
Yeah.
asked me to. They're like, "Hey, can you give me some guidance?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't really like know like what I'm doing, but like I kind of do." I started, obviously like looking into people like Phil Maffetone, Jack Daniels, and Steve Magnus, three of like my favorite people. Dr. Yeses, RIP, he's no
Sure.
longer with us, and this is like all before I started competitively running myself. Then
Hmm.
I got a run certification from UESCA, and that, it's talk about science based. Yeah, it was pretty science based, excellent certification. First one I, ever got. And I learned a whole lot, but it was also while I was in this career change. And so it was kind of overwhelming all at the same time, but it made it a lot easier for me to like have things click while I was running and I was training. Now I will say I did not do all the right things at first. So I would
Sure.
overtrain. I would not sleep enough. I wouldn't fuel during my runs. I like thought I was Superwoman and like nothing affected me, right? So
Yeah.
like many of us runners do. But I was also like pursuing like personal training before getting into coaching.
Yeah.
Um, so I got injured going into the 2018 Boston Marathon. That was my fourth marathon. My
Hmm.
first marathon, just to kind of backtrack, was a New York City Marathon. Then I ran the LA Marathon. Then I ran the Rock and Roll San Diego Marathon, qualified for Boston there in 2017, ran Boston in 2017. And then a
Hmm.
year later, got injured, couldn't run Boston. And
Hmm.
so that year was the same year that I left corporate America. And so I
Okay.
was extremely frustrated I couldn't run. And this is kind of why I wanted to help runners properly strength train, because I was doing it myself, right?
Yeah.
And so that was my clientele when I was at Equinox. Um, Runners, right?
Yeah.
And it was all runners that like were like, I don't want to strength train. I don't really know what to do. And it was really interesting because building that kind of rapport with these individuals was special, because a lot of people go to gyms to kind of bodybuild or, kind of like aesthetically look better or for health, but these were people training for performance.
Yeah.
And so after about a year and a half, when I worked my way up the tiers, I left to go private and my clients followed me. And I really went it all in on run coaching. And this was more in person. This is before the pandemic hit, right?
Mm.
Um, I was also getting back into running myself. I paced my first person through the New York City Marathon in 2019 to a sub 4 marathon. And that was an
Nice.
endeavor in itself because I think that's the hardest thing any coach could do, any individual could do, is pace someone else when
Yeah.
your race is so much bigger than just you. It's not yours, right?
Yeah.
Um, Also, this is someone with like one kidney, so had to be so on top of
Wow.
electrolytes, fueling. Yeah, and he actually just qualified for Boston last year in the
Oh,
Houston Marathon.
amazing.
Very, very special. But yeah, and then in 2020, the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
I don't know if you want me to go there.
Sure, let's do
Uh,
it. Yeah,
Okay,
because
so
I think it's challenges, right? And I feel like a lot of whether it be pandemic or whatever, a lot of our listeners are going through challenges getting their run coaching business. So yeah, the more information you have as far as overcoming challenges or what you did, yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about it.
yeah. So, here I had this run coaching certification. And I was like, oh my God, I have an in-person business. I'm based in New York City, was still based in New York City, right? Everything shut down. And I was like, what am I going to do? And so having the digital ad tech background, that helped me leverage Instagram, which is the platform that I've stuck to kind of
Okay.
grow my following and potential clientele, right? Also, it's as we all know, anyone who has a virtual business, it's important to have presence on multiple platforms, YouTube, a website, Google My Business. So I created all these things to have like
Hmm.
an omni-channel presence. Never really got into TikTok. I don't care for TikTok personally, but
Yeah.
yeah, and created a Facebook page as well because Instagram and Facebook, like they are integrated. And so it's really easy to post content, for example, on both platforms.
Sure.
Um, so after I established myself on all these platforms, I'm like, now we need to grow. We need to get like seen.
Yeah.
I started in the pandemic when we were locked down. I started really like training. I got a coach who was became my mentor and also
Hmm.
started coaching me for a sub 3 marathon. At the same time, I was also creating all these free Instagram live videos to like foster engagement and build a
Yeah.
sense of belonging and community. And that's how I started to grow my following. And the way I labeled that was cross training for runners. What are we going to do when we're inside? How are we going to
Hmm.
maintain healthy bodies? And not just like run ourselves into the ground because the pandemic was a really stressful time for most of us.
Yeah.
And so literally I was like a crazy person. Like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. some days. I'm not kidding. I'd be just like throwing up these lives and like
I
would
love
be
it.
promoting them all day. I'd reach out to brands and be like, hey, you want your product promoted? Can we do a cross collab? So like this IG live is co-hosted. So basically we're reaching each other's audiences as a way to help
Yeah.
boost each other's brands. And I started my podcast as well, which was a great way. And I still use it as a way to network with other people and
Yeah.
to obviously like reach people who are listening to running things, but also just to connect with people in the community because word of mouth goes such a long way. So that was
Yeah.
again another medium, right? To kind of like get on a platform and be seen as Runwithalli. Um,
Yeah.
so I chose to do the hardest thing, not pay Google ads, right?
Yeah.
Not attach
Yeah.
myself to a brand and try to like build my way up. Now it was really hard that
Yeah.
first year. Like I was like breaking even, like barely. Um,
Yeah.
as in, to any of the listeners on here, I didn't take out any loans or anything. I did have a cushion from corporate America to help me kind of like, make a living, if you want to say, but like I had to invest in like, some marketing tools, like getting my website up and running, like I didn't pay someone to do that at
Yeah.
first. And so yeah, it was a roller coaster of a ride. I always like to say I fail every day. And if I'm not failing every day, I'm not doing something right.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it really does allow you to like learn from that and then grow and then do
Yep.
something better. And so I would fail like multiple times a day, Rick,
Yeah.
and no joke.
Same.
And it would be like, oh my God. And it's like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. And maybe this whole half day that didn't go as planned, we learned something from it. And so,
Yeah.
like, let's leverage that. It could be as simple as making a logo to kind of refining processes like emails when people are emailing you about coaching. There's a lot of things that go into running a business. So I took this time to put my processes in place while I was doing all these Instagram lives,
Hmm.
as in what would happen. Like basically, what was my end goal? How many clients or how many athletes did I want to have by the end of this year? And like what would that look like? Was I going to have coaching tiers, which I now have, right? And like what was going to be offered at those tiers? And what I did to kind of help myself understand how I was going to do that was some market research in real time, right? I was
Hmm.
looking at what people were saying on Reddit feeds and Facebook groups. And I know I'm going like deep in the trenches here,
No,
but
this is perfect.
really like what people really needed, like what people were really like struggling with and looking for, because I promised myself at the core value of my philosophy, like I'm in this to like help people. At the end of the day, it's a business, sure, but like I never wanted to lose sight of like why I got into coaching, right?
Yeah.
I got into coaching because like I wanted to help guide other people who didn't know what to do, how to run and train for marathons, sure, but also like how to enjoy running and like all the benefits that come along with it for mental health, feeling confident, like just getting outside, and also yes, running technique, learning how to properly run, right? Like we don't know how to do that if we don't come from the track. I
Hmm.
never had a track background, right? I would have probably said that first. So just like really like helping people to like have some structure in their lives um while doing all this. Yeah. And so taking that market research and basically that helped me refine my processes. And I think we all still like refine those processes every day, but
Yeah.
yeah. And then, so I got that number of athletes by the end of that year. And I was like, okay, cool. We're not where we like want to be ultimately, but that's what stepping stones are for. And that's what yearly
Yeah.
goals are for. Right. And so then I made the next year goal and I was like, how can I make this a full-time living, but also not lose sight of like why I went into this? Because
Hmm.
I think that like at the end of the day, running a business is running a business. And yeah, there's that, but it's also important to like find that balance and bring yourself back to your why.
Yeah.
Especially as a business owner and as the coach, like, yeah, because people are people. And if you're in a people relationship building business, you need to treat people as they deserve to be treated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Um, no, this is great. I mean, that was so awesome because I think so many times, a lot of, especially with social media, right? People don't usually post the struggles. People post, hey, I just won this race, or hey, I'm worth $1 billion, or hey, you don't see the struggle. And I think it was so great for you to say, hey, this is what I did. This is how long it was relentless. I just had to keep at it, consistency. And I think too, in the age of social media, there's all these ads for like internet marketing and everything looks so damn easy. It's easy to get really depressed because you're like, gosh, that guy's making $1 million a year and I can barely pay my rent kind of thing. And the reality is there's no magic bullet, right? You just got to put in the time, be consistent. No, that was great. And as an aside, I laughed sort of internally when you said that about Equinox. So I first moved to New York City and I got a job at this really big health club. There were like 70 full-time trainers. I'm like, how do I get my niche? And I became the weird endurance guy. So anytime people wanted to train for a bike race or running, they're like, give it to the skinny weird kid over there. Like, right? Like someone who doesn't want to get jacked
Yeah.
and, gain all this muscle. So it's kind of funny you said that. That ended up being my clientele as well. And I kind of followed the same route. Eventually took my clients private and so on and so forth. So, um, I totally get you there. So one of the things I think people struggle with in it involves risk, right? Like you noted that you said, okay, don't like the corporate thing. I'm gonna go and try to do this fitness thing. And luckily or fortunately, you had some a bit of a cushion from your corporate job. A lot of people I feel like either maybe do or they kind of started as a side gig. But I feel like even if you have, I don't care how much money you have in the bank, it's still a scary endeavor to leave something that's you get a weekly paycheck, it's
Yep.
consistent. What went through your head and how did you come to that decision to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this? Like, again, I have some money in the bank, but like scary as hell, but I'm going to jump and go for it. What was that like for you?
It was so freaking scary.
Yeah.
It was so scary. I remember like I said, I had a 3-month exit strategy, right? And during that time, I was creating basically like how much money I wanted to make by a certain time
Mm.
to be like kind of like stay in it. So I had like a 6 month plan, I had a yearly plan, and then I developed like my year after that because you don't know. You don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen after a year. So I knew I had like 6 months worth of rent, right? And I had 6 months like worth of like enough money to really like kind of support my daily needs and also my living expenses, right?
Yeah.
Even if I were to make $0,
Hmm.
or even if I were, like, yeah. So that's basically what I said to myself. Every 6 months, I'm going to reevaluate. Did I hit this benchmark? Like, did I, make this amount of money? And if not, like, what do I need to like pull back on expense wise, even though I was very frugal in terms of like what I spent my money on,
Hmm.
in order to like keep at this. And it was a grind. It's less of a grind now in a different way, but it was
Yeah.
like all hours of the day, like just hands on deck because I was in it. I was like, my heart was all there. It still
Yeah.
is. And it was just because I just became like very passionate about also helping people with the same struggles I had, which
Yeah.
was, being in corporate, not seeing your end product or result of what you were doing every day, not feeling like you had a purpose, right? Like ads are great and ad tech is great, but I think that we're all meant for something that we really like feel like could make a difference in other people's lives. And I felt like this was like my calling.
Yeah.
Um, I don't
Love that.
know. Yeah. Yeah. So that's how I kind of made sure like financially I was okay. And like, was it scary? Sure. But I tried to look at it as like every day, like we're gonna have a plan and we're gonna try to work towards that 6 month goal versus like we need to do this, this, and this on this day because everything kind of like overlaps when you're kind of starting up a business and like
Yeah.
you're gonna have some days where you get nothing done and that's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. And so I had to remind myself like removing myself from that corporate structure, like that 9 to 5 and like having those meetings and like just like being so used to like, okay, like 9, we're in the office, 5, 6, we're out of the office. Like removing myself from that mindset and like trying to like create my own schedule, but also baking in days where I could stare at a wall if I
Yeah.
wanted to,
Yep.
because I always say, if you're not good, no one's good.
Yeah.
So, like, and I'm very guilty of running myself into the ground and like
Yeah.
literally being like, what did I just do for the past 3 weeks? And that's never good because then you can't say what like consistent to what you were just saying before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the themes you keep bringing up, and I think this again, in my opinion, at least, sounds like yours as well. This is where a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of run coaches go wrong. Is they don't plan, they don't have goals, they don't put these. Okay, I want to accomplish this by this date. This is, and then doing the research, going on Reddit and seeing, okay, like what's my strategy here? Um, Obviously, that was just innate. You just had that understanding of what to do, maybe from your corporate background, maybe just because that's how your mind works. But what would you tell someone else in your shoes trying to do what you did? How important is planning, goal setting, and then reevaluating as you go along?
Very important. I think
Yeah.
that having like an A, B, and C goal is important. And that C goal could be, this is going to be a very, very vague example. I want to have, two more clients in 2 months that are training for marathons and that are on board with me for 6 months at least, right?
Hmm.
Like that's just very vague. An A goal could be, I want to make sure I retain 10 of my clients for this entire year and just like reevaluate where you are, like maybe every 2 months, but like definitely have a 6 month and a year plan. And then you could work backwards. That's what I'd recommend. Create
Got
those
it.
bigger goals, that A, B, and C goal for your year and your 6 months, and work backwards. Create those smaller micro goals from that. And
Got it.
those could always change. That's okay. I don't think the 6 month and the year goal should really change that much because those should be like your big milestones for your brand, building your
Yeah.
brand. And if you don't hit those goals, maybe, work with a business coach or just like take a business course and kind of, see what other people are doing. Join a networking group, go to those, put yourself out there. I know I did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You kind of have to. Um, Yeah, no, I think it's so incredibly important. I think what's so ironic in when I think about this, when I listen to coaches with the challenges of starting up a business, these are people that will train for a marathon, train for an ultra, and it's you like you said, here's your year plan, here's your 6 months, and they work backwards and all the things you just said, and it's dialed in. But when it comes to their business, the wheels come off, and it's just like, hey, I hope I do well, and hey, let's put out a post and see what happens. And but they don't take the same approach to their business as they do with their athletic training, which is really synonymous, right? It's a plan, it's a goal. It's so I always found that kind of interesting. Um, so maybe you would mention, obviously, it's we all know, right, that starting a business is the furthest thing from easy. I don't know any small business owner that hasn't at one point being like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? This is this is totally crazy. Um,
Yeah.
maybe you could discuss some of the biggest challenges that you faced, not just starting, but also scaling your business, and kind of how you overcame some of those challenges. And sometimes you don't overcome. Sometimes you just have to, right? You just kind of have to go with it. So,
Yeah. So one thing was like time management.
mm,
At first I was like terrible and I managed my time. I would overextend myself every day. Yeah, time blocking was like a no-no. I would just not follow the time blocks. I would say that's number one.
okay.
Like managing your time and like really like having those time blocks. I like Google Calendar for that. And it's okay to
Yeah.
have empty time blocks. Again, if you want to stare at a wall, but like really almost pacing yourself like a marathon, Rick. Like
That's a
the
great
same
analogy there.
concept, right?
Love that.
Pacing yourself, right? Not like sprinting and trying to do 12 things in one day. Maybe
Mm,
picking your top three A-list must-dos and having a B list and having those B lists be like your next day items, A items.
yeah,
So I'd say that. Two, not having coaching tiers for me was like very it was preventing me from scaling my business and actually having a coach working under me now, which I'm very grateful to be able to say I have, because people come to me for different reasons, to Runwithalli for different reasons, and also there was only one of me at that point, and so I had to find a way to like save my energy but also give it where it was needed. And like,
sure.
yeah, like, you know, we're all valuable. And so, like, charge for, my top tier, the access they get to me, the information I provide, the kind of help I provide, and kind of work those tiers down to be more hands off of the lower tiers so I could
Yeah,
scale my business and divert energy where it mattered. Um, Three, I would say having systems in place, like I mentioned briefly before. So for example, having, things like Calendly to set up coaching calls and having those automated systems where, my athletes have links and I'm not just like manually sending them links to set up calls. Um, yes. I don't know if, well, I have to say this. Well, like, I know they're a competitor of yours, but VDOT, having a platform where I could, leverage and like really like use as a platform for programming,
yeah,
has made my life and the life of my athletes exponentially easier because their smartwatches sync to the
sure.
app. And I'm able to obviously comment in the app and really time blocking time for that twice a day. So like I
That's
know when I'm
awesome.
in that app and I know when I'm like, conversing with those athletes. Some at the lower tiers, like I mentioned, well, I mentioned this part, I don't speak to at all, like on the
Mhm.
phone. It's all
Yeah,
like via messaging. And, for those higher tiers, of course I do, but, it's more frequent.
yeah.
And so like, I would say those are the three things. So like having systems in place, time blocking and, what was the second one I said?
As far as like having well systems, I guess you were meaning
Tiers,
like yeah,
tiers,
tiers for
tiers.
so
So
you
I
can
guess I like
scale.
blended. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
blended. So yeah, time blocking, tiers, and the systems in place. I would say
Mm.
those are the three biggest things.
Okay. No, that's great. I think I need to take some of your advice. Maybe I can hire you as a business coach.
Oh my gosh. No, you're doing great.
Um, I appreciate that. So, you had mentioned pricing a few times. You also mentioned when you first got started, I think like a lot of coaches do, just to kind of understand what they're doing, if they even enjoy it. It's almost like an internship, right? You coach people for free. A lot of people, I think, it's almost like imposter syndrome. They're like, okay, I'm a coach now, or I'm going to be a coach or whatever, but like, I don't know what to charge. Like, oh no, I can't charge that much. I'm not worth it. Or, oh no. Um, so for you, how did was getting paying athletes a problem for you? I know you started off coaching people for free, and then as far as pricing, how did you come up with your pricing? Again, you don't have to tell us what it is, but like, how did you determine, okay, this is what I'm going to charge, right? Because I
Mhm.
think some people are like, oh no, either I'm not worth it, that's too much, that's too little, or whatever, and it's all over the map. What was your strategy for that?
Yeah, so my rates started like pretty low. And obviously that wasn't because I undervalued myself. I wanted to like get people to give me a chance, right? But I also
Sure.
wanted to find a way to make a living. This is before I had tiers. Um, Now, obviously, looking at what other running brands and coaches were doing, like just to understand like what was across the market and what people were paying for, I began really researching, like, I guess people who I aspired to be my competitors, or if that's what you want to call it,
Yeah.
and seeing what they were offering at what they were charging. And what I did was then, once I kind of aligned with those rates, I was like, what could I add to this that could make me more valuable and where I could, charge more for my time?
Mm,
Like nutrition as an add-on, for example. I'm back in school for that now. Running technique is another one. That's not really offered sometimes within certain run coaching packages. Also, I'm very into mental training. So, like the holistic training aspect, hitting on the mental fueling, like really,
yeah.
really being diligent about that. That's separate from nutrition. And, just adding these things in to these like to my different tiers now, if you want to call it, that my competition didn't have, and raising my rates that way. And now just like keeping those rates as is, where I found that I'm not going to like outprice myself, but I find that time is money for all of us. And so
Yeah.
like, I feel like, yeah, that's kind of how these tiers evolved and how my
Okay.
rates evolved as well.
Okay. Another challenge, and some of these things I didn't have on that initial list of questions. One of the big issues, we talk to a lot of coaches here at USCA is athlete turnover, right? And a lot of it's just unavoidable, right? Like, hey, Allie, I want you to train me for the Boston Marathon. That's my bucket list goal. Great, done. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
See you in the next life. Um,
yeah,
Other people are, maybe it's a seasonal thing, like, hey, coach me here, but during the off season, I'm going to do, go to spin class or whatever. So I think athlete turnover is just part of it. It's not good or bad. It's part of the thing. That being said, do you have any strategies that you've used to retain athletes, or is it more of just, hey, people will come to me and just organically whatever happens, happens. If they want to stay with me, great. If they want to just train for one race, didn't know if you had anything in place in that regard.
yes. Well, I would say I really am at this point in my life. I think I'm very blessed because I practice what I preach as a coach and an athlete, meaning everything I tell anyone I coach. I've tried before and I also do. I employ these things,
Yeah,
right? I know it's not going to be that way forever. So I think that's like having people see what it takes to achieve hard goals and to achieve these things, just like them, just like the people I'm coaching.
yeah,
You can't just stop. I'm the biggest person, if you follow my Instagram, on consistency. I don't believe in an off season. And if the off season means like not running for a race, you're still running and maintaining a base, but maybe you're cross training, right?
yeah,
You're staying fit and you're keeping that aerobic base. And I hammer that home to every single one I coach. And I say that on our consult calls, like on the initial onboarding calls, I say, I want to make sure that we're building this relationship because for me as a coach, I can't do my job if we're not like building that rapport and if I'm not seeing you like grow. It's very,
yeah,
very hard to have someone, and I've had this just like you have, someone just train for the Boston Marathon and like stop and never come back. I've had
yeah,
people train for the Boston Marathon, take a break and like say they're going to be back and they're just going to do their own thing for 4 months. That's a little
yeah.
different. But I've also, most of my athletes are, we do have a high retention rate
Yeah.
because, I emphasize the importance of staying consistent and that every season is going to look different. And like, for example, after a marathon, you want to run for health and you want to stay fit? Great. I have a girl who's about to do the Empire State Building, hopefully, the
Oh,
stair
nice.
stepping challenge. And we wanted to like, as a result of her getting injured, we still wanted to kind of like maintain her base. So this is an example of what an off running season could look like. Doing the Stairmaster to stay in shape, right? And when she hears this, she's gonna love this. But like literally, she's in incredible shape right now, and she found a newfound love for like a different kind of aerobic endeavor while not like losing her fitness. And it's
Yeah,
still but still like guiding people in that way, right? That's what a coach does, is guides
yeah,
instead of
yeah.
like tells you what to do. And so, yeah, I just really, I guess, like hammering home the importance of consistency and also creating a community. I have created a community virtually. I'll just tell you right now, I have all my athletes in a messaging app where they could all, share what they're doing. And I feel like that creates a very special sense of belonging for
Yep.
people. That was
Yep.
my goal in doing that. And people don't want to lose that when they have
Yeah.
it. And
That's
I love that
yeah.
people are talking in there.
That's so smart. I mean, it's so funny you mentioned that. I never thought of it in terms of the coaching side, but from the USCA side, a lot of the feedback we get, people like, because we put out a survey as, what did you like or hate or whatever.
Hmm.
And a lot of it is, look, hey, your certification was great. I learned a bunch of stuff and whatever. But the real value they feel is the Facebook coaching group where there's now, I think there's over like 2,000 people that they can put a thing. They know all the same people have the same base education, but different standpoints. And they said that's the most valuable part to them, that they can reach
Yeah.
out, post a question and get feedback. So that is so smart to do that. And I think your approach is so unique because it's not this transactional thing. For lack of a better word, you're in it to create long-term relationships, almost like a boyfriend or girlfriend. This is like, look, we're in this together, and now you add on
Hmm.
the community aspect, and it takes a whole different shape to it, right? A whole different sort of culture, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's special to me too. And I always say, like, when I go to race, like I raced Houston this weekend, the thing that inspired me the most was the people I coach. They
Yeah,
always do. Even in
yeah,
Berlin, same thing. Like I know, like just like all of us look at Strava, everyone I coach is looking at my Strava. And also,
yeah,
yeah, I'm looking at theirs, but they're like, I've created a Strava community as well to that end because who doesn't like getting a kudos?
yeah.
It makes us all feel special.
100%. 100%. I mentioned this to someone I was talking to the other day. Like my background is mostly cycling, and Netflix has this professionally produced documentary basically on the Tour de France. It's called the Tour de France Unchained. And they have these contracts with certain teams where they'll put like the video in the car so they can see the team directors. And it's so fascinating to me because these are people that most of the team directors are former pro cyclists, very
Hmm.
accomplished, but you'll see these people like freaking out when their rider wins or crying. They're like, and you just realize that it's a much bigger thing than yourself. And I think that's so interesting because here you are. I should also add that Alli just ran a 1:23:12 at the Chevron Houston Half Marathon, a PR. So very accomplished herself, but like you said, you get just as, if not more, joy and enthusiasm out of seeing your athletes do well.
Oh yeah, it keeps me going, honestly.
Yeah.
They're like my babies,
Yeah.
like
I
it's like
love it.
crazy. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. Um, so one more thing, and this is something you mentioned. You have a coach working underneath you now, and I think as coaches grow their business, they hit that ceiling, right? Like, hey, the only way to make more is to charge a lot more an hour, or work 24 hours a day, which clearly is not feasible.
No.
What was the process like for you to, I guess, decide you wanted to take on a coach? And then if you could explain maybe some of the challenges and how you manage another coach, because they are an extension of you. I think that's one of the challenges we hear is like, hey, I really want to bring on Alli, but like, I don't know if it, like they have that fear of giving that up. And how do I instill that culture that I have into this associate coach or coach underneath me?
Yeah. So I think it's always it's always going to be a struggle, but so Coach Jackie, I have been following her for a while on Instagram, and I admire her approach as a
Mm,
coach. And when I was ready to do this, I approached her about it and I said, hey, would you be interested in becoming a coach for Runwithalli? And we had that conversation. And because her philosophy was pretty similar to mine, it just organically flowed. Now, the way I make sure that we're, living up to the brand Runwithalli's expectations is, of course, like we have like a method, and of course she has a certification. But we have biweekly calls where, that's very important, like where we're touching base and we have an agenda and we go, I'm not going to tell like you guys everything on here and bore you, but we go through, an agenda and make sure, all our athletes are doing X, Y, and Z, during certain seasons while training for certain things. And also, I don't like to micromanage. I promised myself that I would never be that way, but
yeah,
of course, like be the boss. So like when I speak to her, it's more collaborative. And it's more, like we bounce ideas off of one another. Of course, I'm like leading the conversations, but my goal is to grow a team of coaches and allow them all to spread their wings and fly and be unique in their own way. So instill the Runwithalli, value of like building that long-term relationship, like obviously holistic training, being consistent with your training, whether you're running a mile, whether you're training for a marathon. But also, like, I believe that everyone offers something unique and
Yeah,
should be able to share that with other people. And so, yeah, I guess, so to that end, um, I'm not always like, yeah, Jackie, you need to do this, this, and this. But there are certain staples that she follows, and there are certain things that like might make her a little bit of a different of a coach than me, and that's
sure.
okay. And maybe down the line, like when there's like more coaches, she'll be like the main coach and she'll help me to like coach other coaches. We'll see what that
Yeah.
looks like. But yeah, I don't know if that fully answered your question. I think it did.
No, it completely does. I think it's important. I think you make a good point. In my past life, I managed gyms, the whole fitness side,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
really wanted to have, as a director of training and as even the GM of some places, I really wanted to have a lot of diversity. If someone wanted a male, female, someone training for, these weird endurance sports, we had that person, or
yeah,
powerlifting. Like I think it's good. I think what you said was so great because you said, okay, here are the non-negotiables: consistency,
yeah.
community. These are the core things you need to do. Past that, do your own thing, be your own person. Because I think if you do it on either extreme, I'm guessing it comes off the rails, right? If you just say right from the get-go, do whatever you want to do, or you have to follow exactly my way, and then like you said, you become the micromanager, right?
Yeah, yeah. And like obviously like there's a way to like keep your value of your brand, but also like add your little touch to it. Like that's what makes someone unique. And like, the people that have come to Jackie and have been coached under my brand with Jackie, they love her.
Yeah,
And and like I can never replicate her. So like I love that.
yeah.
And that's amazing, Yes.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So last question. Obviously, you're in this for the long haul. This isn't
Yeah.
just like a passion thing. You're like, oh, this is cool. I'm gonna go and do this next in
It
the next
first
5 years.
was initially, Rick. It first was.
I
We were
bet.
right. And like now we're like, wow, okay, we're doing this. We're here.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so now that this is your thing, it's your business, you're putting a lot of time, effort, money, so on and so forth into your business. Where do you see Runali in 3, 5 years, 10 years from now? What's that picture look like? Since obviously
Yeah.
you're big into planning and goal setting, what does that look like for Runali? Run with
Yes,
Alli.
I would love to have a team of coaches and I would love to some way monetize my podcast. Those are like the like A and B goals.
Okay.
Um, that's my 5-year plan.
Okay. Got it.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I mean, from my side of things, I can just say that, all the mistakes I've made, it sounds like you're not doing, at least the core things, you're doing things right. So I certainly wish you all the best. This was an amazing conversation, Allie. I think that the listeners, myself included, like I said, I'm not even kidding. I might have to reach out to you for some business strategy calls or something. But this has been great. For our listeners that want to follow Allie on Instagram, you can go to Run with Allie, and it's ALLI, not ALI. And to your point, on Facebook as well. If any of our listeners are looking to become a USCO certified coach, you can use the code ATE75 to get $75 off. And Ali, I know, you mentioned a lot of things on here, some of the things I didn't allude to that I think would also be really interesting to have sort of separate podcasts about. So hopefully at some point we can do this again on a different topic, but this has been, you put out so much great information on this. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was such a great conversation. I can't wait to be back.
All right. Thank you, Ali.
You're welcome.